Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy Greeley, the other co-chair of the Retired Members Committee. I'm really thrilled to kick off the Retired Members speaker series this year with a focus on our work around question 2 on ending the MCAS as a high school graduation requirement. I think most of the people who are on this Zoom call remember the year, I think it was 1998 when we first experienced the Massachusetts comprehensive assessment system. Because I do this because we all know it is not comprehensive. It's basically a pretty straight up standardized high stakes test. We were promised that this test was going to help us close the achievement gap and it would improve the education for all of our students in Massachusetts. And I think, sadly, I wish that had been true, but we all know that that's not true at all. I want to point out that even 26 years ago, when the MCAS was first introduced, there were many people, both educators and parents and community members, who had serious doubts about the MCAS and what it would actually do to our schools in terms of teaching to the test, narrowing curriculum. I can go on and on. And people fought back very hard. And we almost won early on, but that's part of a history for another time. We did not. So this year, I'm so excited because I feel like for the first time in decades, we have a chance at really changing our state policy around testing that has closed dozens of schools, maybe hundreds of schools, impacted districts, denied diplomas to thousands and thousands of our students. And I want to introduce our MTA leadership, who has really brought this ballot question to the fore and has helped us to really fight and win this battle. So I know you all know Max Page. Max and Deb and Tim Warren are gonna speak, but I will just introduce, Max has been a professor at UMass Amherst in architecture. And I'm just gonna kick it over to you, Max, and then I'll introduce Deb and Tim after you speak.
Thanks, Kathy. It is so great to be here with all of you who have really, in some ways, you can tell the story of public education pre-MCAS and post-MCAS, when the MCAS has been so dominant and such a punitive negative impact on our public schools. And Deb and I are both down here at the NEA for the board meetings and the like, and we just briefed a lot of the leadership of NEA, including the Vice President, Princess Moss, who we hope to have up in Massachusetts in a few weeks to help us win question 2. And they were really impressed with the campaign, and they understand how important it is, of course, to our own educators and students, what happens here, but also how it will impact the rest of the country. When we win question 2, it takes the best public education system in the country and says, we're done with this high stakes punitive test. And it basically says a green light to other states to do it. And frankly, gives a green light as well to hopefully the Harris-Walz administration to follow us. So I always say that we in Massachusetts we have to do our work for our own members and our own communities and students and schools, but we have an outsized influence on the rest of the country. So that raises the stakes for what we're doing and what our victory will mean. So I only just want to say a couple words. I really want to turn it to Deb, who can really talk about the long history of this effort that she's been involved in, and Kathy, you've been involved in, and so many on the screen have been involved in for like 20 years or more. I feel like I got really involved in this about a decade ago, 12, 15 years ago. But this is a battle that has been going on, and frankly, it will not be over when we win. We are taking some of the worst harm away, the high stakes element of the MCAS, but it still leaves this federal law with a standardized test that we're going to have to continue to fight against and fight for better ways of looking at our schools and the qualities of our schools and how to assess them and what resources they need to succeed. So consider this, as I said, with Fair Share, when we won that, that was a great start. Taxing the rich, $2 billion a year, that's a great start. Winning the elimination of the MCAS as a high stakes test is a great start, very important, but the work will continue on. And I guess the main thing I want to say about this fight and why, and I, remember getting involved, getting, in our family, our own daughter opted out and frankly, got enough of her colleagues to opt out, that suddenly Amherst Public Schools dropped 2 notches just because of the lack of participation in this MCAS on principled grounds. Like, how crazy is that? This ranking and sorting and basing it on whether or not you follow through on this punitive test. But I think the thing that excites me the most at this moment right now is that when we win, we turn the direction of public education away from where it's been going, which is focused on rigid, narrow curriculum, focused on test taking, ranking and sorting people, reinforcing property values and Wellesley and Weston and all the other W's, and keep depressing property values and income in other places. We get away from that and we can turn it back slowly back towards more authentic learning in the classroom, led by our educators, based on our authentic state standards that we believe in, and not this Pearson-led for-profit testing industry. Now, that's a huge curve we're going to have to keep riding down, but this victory sort of says, all right, we're not going in that direction anymore. We're going back towards something better. A reliance on and a trust in our public school educators, in concert with parents and students, to build the best public education system for all at all levels. So that's my real excitement and hope for this work. And all of you have done incredible work in getting us on the ballot, in advocating for this, now making the arguments, and now we have about 42 days left to make sure the voters hear from each one of you, because if they hear from you, they vote with you. That has just been so clear. That was so clear in the charter fight. When voters talk to educators, they vote the way the educators say they should vote. That's just an incredible power you have. So I know Tim is going to talk about the work we're going to be doing and how you all can get even further involved. I will stop and turn it to kind of the leader in this fight, our VP, Deb McCarthy. But I guess you want to introduce her first.
So yes, I would very much be honored to introduce Deb McCarthy. Deb is the vice president of the MTA, but I met Deb, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago, around a table at the MTA offices before the MTA was really on board with this campaign. And I was blown away by this elementary school teacher, grade 5, right, Deb, or 4? I forget which, but
Yeah.
from Hull, who I'm sure you all know that she took a strong stand to become a conscientious objector and refuse to give the MCAS. And since becoming a officer of the MTA, she has really been an outstanding voice for people to understand the harm and dangers of this test, and fighting for a more just, a more interesting and engaging kind of education. So I hand it to you, Deb.
Thank you, Kath. One, I'm just going to acknowledge up front, this is a little emotional for me. There is no group that I admire most than the retired educators. And this has been a pretty special day, as Max said, just coming from the NEA. You know what? It's like yesterday. I can remember my first day on the job, and the veteran educators who were there every step of the way and mentored me. and grounded me in best practice. Like Kath, I was there in the beginning of the MCAS, and I did believe in the false promises. And I was a data guru, and really, in the beginning, was pretty judicious with MCAS and what it was supposed to deliver. But before long, it was the harm that I was seeing my students experience in the classroom, and also the lack of the promise being fulfilled, that made this an issue that I needed to speak up and stand up about. I always do when I'm in spaces, acknowledge the fact that as a niece of Maureen Dunn, who co-founded the POWMIA movement, while I have been in many spaces where educators have felt exactly the same way, the evaluations can force educators to not speak up or tell their truths. And I just always like to acknowledge that having her as a mentor helped me speak out louder than I think most. You know, this, Max, when you were talking about opting out, I think one of the things that it made me think of is, and we're going back some years, but I had 3 students in my classroom who had opted out. And not only did it bring us down a level, but in our district, these 3 families were identified as being on free and reduced lunch. And one of the students who had opted out in my class, while their names weren't used, people knew who the 3 kids were, and his father had just committed suicide that year, and the mom had a tumor. And he was a straight A student. He had a lot of anxiety, but we then compounded the issue by identifying these 3 students in my classroom of being on free and reduced lunch because of that subcategory. And so the harm has really been egregious. Like, this is so much more than just ranking and shaming. We had a student cut themselves. I had a student on the spectrum in the class beside who took 2 of the meds so that they could focus and spent the night in the hospital. There were stories of children who were dying of cancer who took this test. So the harm has been going on for a long time, and I feel like we are so close to ending that harm. And so that's going to be an enormous victory. And Max, you are right, because there's going to be another fight ahead, because folks don't acknowledge our professionalism and expertise as educators who know our students and our families best. But the last piece that I just want to share before we move on to Tim is the commercial came out today. And you're going to see the girl in the front row, and she just keeps raising her hand and raising her hand. And, she's that student that every one of us wants in our classroom. And while they were filming the commercial, it was shared with us that this student did not pass the science exam as a freshman by 1 point. So her sophomore year, she had to take the DESE remediation science class. And again, she did not pass it again by the 1 question. And her best friend talked about and shared with us the change that she saw in this student, the low self-esteem, the anger, and how she just didn't feel like she was smart anymore. Not only did she have to take the remediation courses, but then she was denied the opportunity to take the courses that she wanted to take. And so her high school career, even though she passed it as a junior, has been significantly impacted by the high stakes of a science test. So I just want to honor this space and all of the work that you've done before me, because it's on your shoulders that we stand. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Deb. Before we move on to Tim, Tim is our fabulous field grassroots organizer to share about some of the ways we can get involved. I wanted to ask Deb or Max if you could talk about why a ballot question? Why has the MTA taken this on? And isn't there a better way to go? And I don't think there is, but I'd really like you to address that question.
Well, I think it's a great question. I can remember like it was yesterday, 10 years ago, when I got on a boat the last day of school and came into Boston to testify because there was some bill. And this woman named Alice Peiss, who was chairing the hearing. That was a decade ago, right? We have filed legislation every 2 years since. We have packed the room. We've done everything and then some. We've had conversations with superintendents, with school committee members, with DESE, and it's all fallen on deaf ears. And so at some point, I think after the pandemic, when everybody was saying not to give it, and still we doubled down and decided to raise the cutoff score, I think that's when it was, and Max, you can add to it, but that's when it was like, we have no choice but to bring this to the people.
Yeah. I'll just say a couple words. I mean, exactly right, Deb. I mean, look, we were actually talking to the governor about this, and we followed the process that you're supposed to do as a good democratic citizen, which is you bring it to your legislators. You say, this is the case. We assemble co-sponsorships. We make good legislation. We propose things. And we did that year, legislative session after legislative session. And at a certain point, you say like, well, they're not listening. And so we have to go take it to the people, because this is a fundamental truth I think I've learned over these years, is the people are more progressive than Beacon Hill. And so you may love your individual legislator, but together they are more moderate, more conservative on a number of items than are overall the population. So when we go and say, let's pass the Fair Share Amendment, or let's go and raise the minimum wage, or let's go and protect trans students, we are more often than not winning. And so we've said that. And now all of a sudden, legislators and electeds are saying, why rush to the ballot? Why don't we sit down and have a conversation? And I just want to note, and I'll stop in a second, is just that a place like New York, they had a blue ribbon commission to look at what does their assessment system look like? What's the best thing? And what came out of a thoughtful process was that they said, let's not rely on high stakes tests. They're going to get rid of a requirement that students pass the Regents. We haven't been able to get a real commission in this state. The commission that DESE just set up, there's a report we can all share out with you, was basically like, talk about anything as long as you accept the MCAS, as long as you accept ranking and sorting of the MCAS. So it's basically like kind of a joke. So anyway, this is taking it to the people. And when we win, we'll have more momentum to push back against any further efforts that they make to undermine us.
Great, thanks, Max and Deb. Before we go on to Tim, not to put you off, Tim, but people, we encourage you to ask questions, and you can either put your question in the chat, you can put it in the Q&A, you can raise your little hand that's down at the bottom of the screen. If you want to think about a question, just feel free to write it into any of those places. We really do want this to be a discussion and a conversation that empowers us all. So I will give people time to do that. And in the meantime, I'm going to turn it over to Tim, who has been working for Grassroots and has been doing a phenomenal job of organizing and this campaign statewide. So I'm just going to turn it over, Tim.
And I greatly appreciate that buffer, actually. I've found the pattern in all of these meetings is they say, okay, here's the lineup. Let's have Deb give these heart-wrenching stories, get everybody in tears, and then have Tim come right after her and talk about numbers and spreadsheets. It's really brings me into the game. So I appreciate.
Sorry, Tim, I'll let you go first.
So how's it going, everybody? My name's Tim Warren. I'm a political and community organizer with the MTA. I've been tasked to the MCAS campaign for what feels like about 5 years now. We've been fighting this issue for a very long time at the MTA in a variety of ways. This particular campaign has been going on for about a year and a half. We had both a legislative path that we were looking at and also this ballot path. Obviously, the legislature did not do what we needed them to do, which is why we are here today. We were out 2 summers ago knocking on doors, preparing our members that we might be going to the ballot. We collected well over 100,000 signatures in September. We collected tens of thousands more in May. And really what I'm talking about today is kind of the more traditional campaign aspect that started this summer, when you're thinking it was just generally moving towards the election of actually winning at the ballot. So starting this summer, we've knocked on over 150,000 doors so far. We're approaching 300,000 phone calls, and that has allowed us to identify over 53,000 voters for the campaign. We are over 80% in identifying those voters as a yes, which is a great sign. I will caveat that we are targeting people. We're not really targeting the people we expect to vote no for sure. So our numbers aren't quite that high, but we are having a lot of great conversations. As Max and Deb mentioned, we are also up on the airways. So we're on TV and we are on streaming services and all that fun stuff. I just posted, if any of you are Facebook users, a link to our commercial on Facebook. Obviously, we're spending money to put it on TV and have it like in commercials when somebody is watching Hulu or Amazon Prime or whatever it is. But we're also trying to spread this message to people organically through social media. If anybody on this uses Facebook and you can like and share this with your networks, that would be great. Obviously, if I send something on there, I'm probably going to reach a decent amount of you all, but I'm not going to reach your siblings, your children, your friends. We can reach other groups, and with this message being delivered by someone they know as an educator and they know as an expert on this issue, actually compounds the impact that we can have. So as I said, we've been having tremendous success with actually talking to voters one-on-one. And that's obviously the most important thing we can possibly do for this campaign. And things are really, starting to solidify. There's a lot of chess matches that happen behind the scenes of when and where to place resources. And what it's looking like at the moment is the opposition side of this question is likely going to do a late push right around the time early voting starts to try to kind of stir up the pot, spread some misinformation, and scare people into voting no, because you all have done a little bit too good at your job and created the best education system in the country. So people can generally get a little fearful of doing anything that could disrupt that. So that's probably their tact. The bad news for their strategy is that gives us a very significant amount of time to get our message out unchecked. And in the campaign world, that is a really big advantage. So the more people we can talk to, obviously we'll be on commercials. We are putting letters to the editor, op-eds, we're on social media. We're like 7-Elevens, we're everywhere. But generally speaking, this election is probably going to be decided in the next 3 weeks, right? In that amount of time, can we build enough of a lead? Can we inoculate enough voters? Can we have enough conversations that by the time they start running ads, it doesn't matter, right? And then we have 3 weeks after that to ramp up like a normal campaign and finish this thing out to victory. If we do what we need to do, I feel very confident in our ability to really have the trusted voice of educators out there in the world and having the voters be like, you know what, the educators are supporting this. Their ideas sound right. I'm going to vote yes on this question. We have noticed that sorry, Kathy, you trying to?
I just there was a question in the chat about what are some of the arguments that the no side is making that people can be aware of, and what possible responses are. Do you mind talking about that now, or do you want to?
I can jump into that in just a second, for sure. And really what we've noticed is the number one thing that we can do, and this isn't going to surprise anyone, with campaigns, when we have these one-on-one conversations, we overwhelmingly convince people to vote yes. If that person sees a commercial after that conversation, they are not going to get switched back to a no. Like that's just not going to happen. So right now, especially, we have 6 weeks left. We have to talk to as many voters as humanly possible to try to make sure that, that is what is going to drive this. I've dropped a link in the chat, and you'll also get this by email of canvases that are happening throughout the state. We have something like 52 canvases happening over the next couple of weeks. We are also phone banking on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday every week from 5 to 7 p.m. And generally speaking, the hope is the more we do this, like they don't have, no matter how many resources they put in, they are not going to have people power of actual human-to-human contact of people expressing why they support this question or why they oppose this question. They only have money. So we need to leverage our support. We need to get out of the doors, get out on the phones, talk to our friends, because this issue is extremely important. This is our chance to win it, and this is how we are going to win it. Lawn signs. Lawn signs has been a real issue for this campaign. And I will say the reason it's an issue is not a supply issue. The reason that it's an issue is an extreme demand problem. I'm actually in a text chain right now about the next batch that are coming out. Our general experience is every time I get them to a regional office, they disappear before I can get anyone there. People are really excited about this campaign. The bad news is it's been difficult getting people signs that are asking for them. The good news is they're getting out in the world the way we want them to, and we are getting a new batch, hopefully, to the regional offices next week. I don't want to make any promises on lawn signs because I've made too many and I keep breaking them. So the opposition really comes down to a messaging thing. One of the aspects is the opposition is not really out and about in a mainstream way, right? They have op-eds, letters to the editor. You might see somebody on, the news, but they don't have this big apparatus of spreading their talking points and their misinformation. So we have a lot of things that we expect them to say, possibly, that we are ready to counter, but we are kind of trying to keep our powder dry on what they are actually, until they actually say it, so that they don't know our counters before they actually make their argument. One of the things that is very much built in is the way we're actually messaging this issue, right? So a lot of our messaging is designed specifically to counteract anything that they're going to say going forward in the future. So our main talking points, and messaging kind of scheme is, the first one is we really need to give people a reason to vote yes, right? And that reason to vote yes is that the MCAS graduation requirement takes away the things our students need most to be successful, right? If you ask people what they need in the classroom, critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, working as a group, things like that, trades, vocational programs, anything in that realm are the things that are taken away to have more test prep so that people do well on the test, right? So our education system will be better because we will be able to educate the whole child if we do not have to focus on making sure they pass this silly test, because we can't ruin their lives and just purposely allow them not to pass the MCAS test and not get a high school diploma. And if this test isn't assessing our students properly, why are we causing such harm on our children with anxiety? And the test clearly discriminates against students of color, low-income students, students with disabilities, English language learners. So those kind of aspects of, this is why we're voting yes, but really a big part of our messaging strategy is also that we do support standards, right? Like average voters, most people do not understand the statewide standards, how curriculums work, how planning a class works and assessing students work. We really need it to come down to a trust thing where educators are the experts on this. They know what's important. So we are telling people, and truthfully telling people, this is not misleading at all, that standards are good and we support standards. but the MCAS does not accurately measure a student's ability to succeed. It does not measure these standards. So we want high standards, not high stakes, which is kind of our tagline. And we are expecting them to go with the standards aspect. And our messaging is currently tailored towards that. The small things that they have done, they've actually picked every field of play that I would choose. They did a really small media buy and tried to basically say that educators are a no. I'll take that battle any day. Their second one was, this is good for special needs kids. Yeah, I'll take that battle too. If they want to have this campaign on who educators support and whether or not this test harms students with disabilities, that's probably not very good campaign strategy. So we really need to see what they do in the next few weeks. I will just say we are ready. But the good news is our arguments are mostly in the atmosphere is unchecked right now. And we're trying to talk to friendly audiences, which does help.
There's one question in the chat, Tim, that's asked if the information will be available in Spanish.
Yes. So we have bilingual literature in Spanish, Portuguese, traditional and simplified Chinese, Haitian Creole, and Cape Verdean Creole. I'm missing a language, but yes, we do have bilingual lit in Spanish. And they're in all our regional offices.
Another question, Tim, has been about outreach to students themselves. Do we have a strategy around either working with high school students or college students, recent graduates? Are there people in the coalition that are, represent that youth vote?
Yes, we have done a lot of work with student groups. I don't know if Deb or Max want to jump in on some of the more specific details. But generally speaking, yes, those are great voices. We also found, like, during the signature gathering campaign, it was oftentimes we were saying something and the kid was like barking at their parents to sign the thing. So obviously they just lived this, and they can tell very compelling and personal stories of, why this test is bad for them. So there has been a lot of outreach to students. We're trying to get them to speak up on it, and stuff like that.
I know Raphael has his hand up, and there's another question in the Q&A Raphael, does this have to do with the campaign? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Today in the Globe, there was an article about the results of the MCAS, the latest ones. And of course, as being the Globe, they say, this is what people should know in preparation of the vote on the Proposition 2. And I wonder if I have some troubles with the way that they calculated the numbers. It seems that they are counting the numbers with the new standards that they raise rather than the old standards before. So I don't know if that will be something that should need to be pointed out about what is the meaning of this lowering of the test as it appeared in the newspaper, and if that could be addressed.
Could I just jump in,
Yeah.
Kathy?
Go ahead, Mac.
And I feel my computer heating up as I see Deb's, because this is infuriating, the way they use those numbers. And Deb, you will have some things to say about this. A couple things. Yes. So what looks like, decline, etc. This is based on as they raise the scores. So when we knew this, more students, it's just predictable, more students wouldn't meet that. So it's not like students are declining on these scores, forgetting that we hate this way of evaluating learning anyway, but they've changed the scores. Furthermore, we have a growing number of students who are English language learners who are impoverished, and we know how tightly connected our MCAS standardized test scores with family income and family education levels. So there's a beautiful, it's a powerful letter from the Lynn superintendent, which I'll try to post in the chat if I can in a second, which he says our poverty rate went up from, I don't know, it was like 48% to 78% during the pandemic and since. So we are taking care of some of the poorest and trying to educate some of the poorest students in some of the worst economic conditions. And you are punishing us and you're blaming them for their life conditions. And now you're going to welcome in another 1,000 seats of charter schools, draining more money from the public schools. And then you're going to say, oh, we need to take over the schools by DESE, even though DESE has failed miserably whenever they have taken over public schools, like in Lawrence and Holyoke and Southbridge and elsewhere. So it's just like a catastrophe, and they cannot get themselves out and to say, shit, we're creating havoc. We're making things worse. But instead they just say we're sticking to the system and we're doubling down, and they just voted to raise the scores even further. So you can see I'm getting agitated. Deb, I'll turn it to you so I can calm down.
Well, it really does get me really, really angry because they are exploiting students deliberately so that they can continue to lift up $1 billion testing industry and to create a two-tiered system of educational privilege. These third graders weren't in a classroom with their teachers to get the direct reading instruction. And the other thing is, for those of you at an elementary level and those of you as experts in teaching reading, I never used the MCAS to diagnose a student in my classroom who had a difficulty reading, right? I went and got my Orton Gillingham certification so that if a child made it to 5th grade, it was not their MCAS scores that I used for the intervention, right? It was running records. It was to do the work with the OG, but not the MCAS scores. And so they are exploiting our children once again. And it's wrong on so many levels. And so that's why I get really, really angry about this. Yeah.
Okay. So we all can write a little note to the Boston Globe and share some of our opinions about this. I want to encourage people to do that, even though sometimes it feels hopeless. I will say, if you write 100 words, like that's like 10 sentences. It's more likely to be punished. Like if you write what is in your heart and you just put it on there and you send it off, it's much more likely that they will publish it than if you try to write a whole essay about all the reasons why you're opposed to the MCAS. So if we can do that today, that would be an awesome thing. I wanted to add one other in the question about what is the no side trying to do. I think part of what the no side has been doing is making us people confused and trying to say, oh, they're trying to get rid of any kind of assessment. They're trying to get rid of any kind of accountability. They're trying to end the MCAS, and then we won't have anything left. And so I just want to, like, among us, I would love to end the MCAS altogether, but I've said that to people when I've been canvassing. I personally don't like this, but this question isn't asking you that. This question is asking you to end the MCAS as a graduation requirement for a student to get a high school diploma. So I just want to encourage people to be aware of that. There was another question in the chat that goes back to you, Max, about Senator Jason Lewis's support for the campaign and voting yes on 2, but he also proposed rigorous statewide graduation standards. And could you comment on that and how just how you see that next step happening?
Sure. and obviously Deb, you comment as well. I mean, on the face of it, let me just say first, it's a very good thing. We want everyone to sign on to say they want to vote yes on question 2. So we'll take it. And it's very important. Jason Lewis is, you know, he led on, he's the Senate chair of the Education Committee and helped pass the Student Opportunity Act, and really did listen to us in many ways. And so it's good that he's endorsing it, because the rest of the legislature, no, I shouldn't say that. We have 50 other legislators who've signed on, committed, and are leading canvases and the like. So that's great. But there are a number of legislators and legislative leaders who are not with us. So that's a very good thing. But of course, you know, he said he told us he was going to do this, say I'm voting for yes on 2, but then I want to start a conversation about other kinds of requirements we might have. And so I think we have to be prepared for that battle coming up next. I will say that something we'd like to, maybe not today, but certainly would like to hear from all of you more about. One thing he lifts up is, I think, is performance assessments, performance-based assessments, which is something we have helped promote. That is the MCAS, MCIEA, the Mass Consortium of Innovation and Educational Assessment. Many of our districts, or a number of our districts, are involved in looking at alternatives to high-stakes testing. And so that's an interesting direction. We're obviously very cautious about him wanting to use that as a new MCAS. It's supposed to be about authentic assessments, not about some new punitive test. And then the other area that's worth us talking about, and we've had some conversations with our presidents, our local presidents, is helping every district have as the course of study something called Mass Core. And I can put the link in the chat. I think about 83% of students in the state go to schools where that course of study is the standard. That doesn't mean a curriculum. It means 4 years of English, 4 years of math, 3 years of history, 2 years of world languages. You know, in other words, it says this is a very rigorous course of study, and that's what every student should follow. And there's, in some ways, we think that there's districts who want to do this but simply can't afford it. There's high schools in Boston. There are rural districts who say we would love to offer that full range, but we can't afford 2 years to be able to offer 2 years of world language to every student. So in other words, we have to be cautious with what he's proposing and push back against a new layer of assessment that's just punitive. But there might be pieces that we actually want to champion. Let's find a time to really talk through your experience, since many of you taught in schools, with Mass Core as the course of study. Anyway, that's what I would say about that. And I'll put it in the chat when I find it.
Great, thanks, Max. Deb, did you want to add anything? Or Tim? Or anybody else?
I just want to respond to what Andre put in the chat. And it's funny, Andre, when talking to folks, this is a point that will make a no vote become a yes vote. When you mention this, if you go on to the no on 2 side, when they list their sponsors, the first one is the Boston Foundation. And when I looked into that group, this is a group that represents private schools, Catholic schools, charter schools. So clearly they're afraid of losing business if all of a sudden parents who can afford to send their kids to schools that don't give the MCAS. So I agree with you that it is a talking point that needs to be lifted up more in the campaign.
Great. Are there other questions or comments that people would like to bring up? Again, feel free to either just raise your little hand or put it in the chat or the Q&A. Tim, are there things more? It seems like one of the things that people are wanting are the campaign materials, and do you have advice for how to get them?
Sure. So we did forget to mention something that's fairly minor, but I guess I'll mention it anyway. We did get the endorsement of U.S. Representative Jim McGovern today, so that is actually some big news. So, and as I mentioned in those 3 weeks, like success begets success, right? When we have momentum, more people will jump on the bandwagon. It kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So the more work we do, the better the campaign looks, more politicians will jump on. As they jump on, others will want to join. So this is really big news to have some of our federal delegation on. Hopefully that momentum will continue to grow. I will pivot to materials. We just restocked all our offices with door literature, stickers, and rally signs. Those 3 things are all things that I can restock in the regional offices very quickly. We print those in-house. If I make a request for like 1,000 pieces of door lit or 80 rally signs or anything like that, they're usually in the mail that day and they get to a regional office within a day or 2. We just restocked with buttons. They might be gone already. We are in the process of getting more lawn signs out there in next week. I don't think those will last long either. So the 3 main things, which I know lawn signs are exciting, buttons are exciting, bumper stickers are exciting. Campaign-wise, the most important piece is the literature, right? So the information card that when we knock on doors, we leave with voters. That is purposely designed so that you can be talking to a friend and hand it to them. You can leave it for somebody. It has really good information on the campaign. So we will not, foreseeing a small breakdown, which can happen with how fast things are moving and if people take a lot of materials. Those 3 things will always be in the MTA regional offices, as well as some of the bilingual literature that I mentioned before. And we will do our best for the buttons, lawn signs, and bumper stickers. We also have people throughout the state, especially canvases. So if we know you're showing up to a canvas, we can communicate with the leader on the ground there and hopefully get some additional materials if, materials are needed. We were moving stuff around the state a little more in the beginning. And then we realized when I'm not at my computer all day, things go wrong. So I've stopped driving. Deb actually locked the door. I haven't been out in weeks. They just pass food into so we'll do our best of keeping those regional offices stocked. And if anything has run out, like I have ways of getting everybody to tell me that, but if anybody sees that things are running out, I can check in and restock stuff.
Okay, we have a couple of hands, so I'm gonna call on Andre first and then Joanne.
Thanks, Kath. This is a meeting of retirees, so I assume I am not the only grandparent on this call. I've been canvassing with my grandson. No one can resist his arguments. If you knock on a door with a kid and they're wearing a Question 2 t-shirt and they're handing out the literature, we get votes instantaneously. We're also training the young people, to be active citizens. So I would encourage you to have that experience as well. And it's a joy on any number of levels. Let's go win this. Thanks.
Thanks, Andre.
Andre might have some signs, just saying. He drops them off in Dedham and Braintree, so he might be holding. I don't know.
I got 2 left. I've been
Right.
driving around. I did Dedham in Brooklyn. I've got 2 signs left. Come on over. I'll give you a little dinner and you can have the last 2 signs.
Go ahead, Joanne.
Hi, I'm Joanne. I'm just so glad to be at this meeting because every article I read, my blood pressure at this point goes up. I'm just wondering, are there opportunities for us adults to tell our own personal stories about what happened, my experience with testing and what I was growing up in? I think that, let me just see, Deb mentioned some situations with kids, where they were coming from. And I just, I can only say for myself that I definitely had that experience of feeling stupid or that stupidity thing. And it took me until I got into college and, taking courses. I taught for over 25 years. I'm retired. Um, I am working with restorative justice, so I feel like I still have opportunity to reach kids. But I just think it's so important for our stories, and that's what I have responded to in the newspaper, the Globe, if there's an article about it, that I think it's so important that not just the kids, because I totally agree with the last speaker, but also how that life experience of testing in schools impacted me. And my own kid actually did go to I only have one, so she did go to private schools because I was going to avoid that life experience for her if I could.
So I just want to thank you for being so honest. We have Soapbox. That's a tool that you can use to uplift your story. One of the social media narratives that's been shared in the last 2 weeks is of a firefighter from Quincy. I think he's in his mid-30s, early 40s, who talks about being dyslexic and how he almost didn't get that diploma and what it was like. And again, I just want to thank you because it is stories like that that move voters and that drive those of us on the screen to get this done. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Joanne,
Yeah.
I just put it in the chat, the soapbox that Deb referenced. Look, it's right on your screen. Do
Yeah.
it for 30 seconds, make more than one. Say, I'm going to tell a story about this one student. I'm going to tell a story about myself. These are really valuable, and we are starting to use them and share them on social media. You're exactly right. Your personal stories, experience as a parent, as an educator are crucial.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll just add from like a campaign standpoint, like not only are there opportunities, that's actually one of the things we need the most. Like the most important voice in this campaign is the voice of educators, right? We want anywhere and everywhere people to be hearing, as an educator of 22 years, as a 5th grade teacher, as a high school history teacher, like that is how we want to open things. Because if people are going to wonder where educators stand on this question, and our goal from the beginning of this campaign is to not have people question that. So it takes a lot of work, and we need those comments everywhere. Like as an educator, like name yourself as an educator is really important. Those testimonials that can end up on social media are great. We've also had a lot of letters to the editor in papers throughout the state. People get hung up on ideas like the Globe and the Herald, and obviously we're doing a lot of work to be in those spaces, but also like that small paper in the towns around you, like people read those. Those are really important too, and you're just always reaching different audiences. So having that and telling that personal story of why this is so bad and how much harm it causes, like people just need to keep seeing the true, because the people at DESE that have this, like I remember them doing the hearing, like they just sit behind a computer all day with a spreadsheet and data that doesn't make sense, right? People want to hear from those who are that we actually trust with our children every single day. And having educators emotionally and forcefully come in favor of this question in opposition to the graduation requirement is vital to this campaign. So there's Soapbox, there's letters to the editor in your local papers, and just generally communicating with the people around you. I always tell people that educators are walking talking points. You all do my job for me. I can spend hours and hours and hours, and then people tell a personal story, and I'm like, yeah, that's much better. So like really just, I'm here because of X, Y, and Z. I was in the classroom, so I can occasionally throw the non like political hack answer at people, which is nice. But it's really powerful when people hear true stories from educators and their experience in the real world.
And I just want to point out again in the chat that Mary McDonald, Mary is the editor for MTA Today, and she's writing a story on question 2 and is interested in hearing people's stories. So I will, you can reach her at mmcdonald@massteacher.org, but we'll send an email after this that has all of these. I don't know about everybody else, but I get overwhelmed with all these links and emails and all of this. So we'll try to put them all in one place that you can reach them. Go back and think about what you want to do. I also just wanted to share, I work with a group of retired, I live in Cambridge and I taught in Cambridge, and there are a group of us, about 10 or 12 of us, that meet every other week. We've been meeting for 2 years now, talking about MCAS and standardization of curriculum and the overuse of technology like iPads and like all the database stuff. It's all in, kids are on screens all the time now. So these concerns. And one of the people in the group wrote me an email that she ran into someone at a open house night. All the kids are going back to school. And she told me this story. I was like, okay, that is a story to send to the local newspaper. Like, you just told me a story that you were just sharing, and that in itself, and that, like, in literally 3 minutes, like, we cut unimportant things out, put question 2 in there, and can send it off to a local paper. So again, I know people get so intimidated about the idea of sitting down and writing, but if you tell your story, it just comes out and it's easy, and it doesn't have to be perfect, and it has so much power to it. So
Kathy, could I just
encourage
jump in before you go to the next person, just on that point? One thing we discovered way back when in the Question 2 campaign, when we knew the Boston Globe was not going to be with us, and guess what? They're not going to be with us on this either. That actually doesn't matter. What matters much more are the 14 other daily papers in the state. So what you just said about writing a quick letter, a quick message, those are more likely even to get published in your local paper and more widely read and more influential. People, I know I read the Daily Hampshire Gazette carefully. The Globe, maybe where Deb and I work, we kind of have to like pay attention a little bit, but most people don't even get through there. They don't get through the paywall. But local papers are still much more widely influential and read in the regions.
Great. Go ahead, Rick.
Good segue, Max. The Daily Hampshire Gazette just published today the resolution that the Northampton School Committee just passed supporting question 2, and it is a powerful resolution. It's just not supporting question 2, but they talk about teaching and learning. And so I know there's been other resolutions around the state, but it is just another group of people you can organize to go to, like the school committee, and put this forward. So I put it in the chat once already. If it's lost, I'll put it in again right now. Okay, it's there right now, I think.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Great. We have another question. Could you speak to what Business Alliance, whose support No, hopes to gain by being against educators and students? Is it just making money from testing?
Yeah,
Go ahead,
so
Deb.
the group that's listed, I think there's 16. They all go back to that Charles River Chamber of Commerce, that they're part of it, right? And they say that their talking point is that there is a direct correlation between a test score and the income that somebody will make when they get out of school. And we counter with, is that why you don't hire any of the graduate students from BC High? Why you don't hire any of these graduates from the #1 prep school in the country. But yes, they were all connected, really. And the other thing about this real quick, Kath, is I don't even think they invited anybody to like present for no and present for yes. They just made the decision in isolation, because I haven't been able to find a small business owner that is part of these Chamber of Commerce's that was engaged in the debate. And the same thing goes true for the superintendents. I mean, we have the Massachusetts Parent Teachers Association who was on board with us, the school committee indirectly, and yes, but with the superintendents, we asked if we could speak to the executive committee, and Mary said that that time had passed. And so we didn't even get to speak to them, so it's rigged.
I think we need a whole other webinar on what's behind all of this.
Yeah.
Max, I see you wanted to jump in.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's worth looking at the whole enterprise, not just of tests profiting from testing, but the larger effort of businesses to profit from our public schools. When places open charter schools, it's really a real estate deal. It's nothing about education. It's about getting federal tax credits. It's about making money off the land, which is often given by the city. So there is a whole piece about that. And one of your retiree members, Rich Levy, formerly of Salem State, and Joanna Gonzalez and others have worked on a whole privatization paper and written all about that. Anyway, that's a great topic for another day. I do also think that the business community, forgetting any specific profit motive, they have bought in to this whole ideology, which is a kind of an anti-government distrust, public schools distrust government ideology. And so they really, in some ways, they are true believers in this idea that somehow, if you have this high stakes test and you get people in line and you force those lazy teachers to like follow the program more, that somehow this helps society and helps future workers. It's hard to understand, but it is been a consistent theme that these big business types have been for charters, for the MCAS, against taxing millionaires to fund public schools. I mean, they've been against most of the good things we've won.
So I know it's almost 4:15, and I would like to just I know Max has something else that he would like to talk about, but before you jump into that, Max, I want to follow up on what you just said, because I've been thinking about why I've spent so much of my last 25 years working on against the MCAS and trying to change it. I'm like, does it really matter? Like, why do you spend this time and this energy, and why have you been talking about this? And I think that it's not the MCAS, it's the value of public education. And I am very afraid that through the MCAS, I think someone, asked why are we so stuck with this? I believe that part of it is, and we've seen that the data from the MCAS tests have been used to say that our public schools are failing and that our teachers are failing and they're not working hard enough. And I think that there very much is a push away from valuing this incredible democratic instrument, that this foundation of our democracy is our public education system. So I just want to encourage each person who's on this today to at least do one thing before in the next week or two, one thing of do a canvas, write a letter, talk to your school committee. We'll share the Northampton resolution. It's phenomenal. Talk to your family, talk to your friends. As everybody said, people, while the big uppity ups may not trust teachers, actually our own people trust us. So talk to them.